Welcome back, everyone. We are continuing the Second Punic War as well as the Hannibal series. We just saw them escape the valley Agia Flaninus. Falerinus is actually the correct way to say it. Now, what will happen? The Fabian strategy. Is it going to work? Let's find out. Glad you're here. Hit that like button. Let's watch.
But while Fabius's political reputation suffered, his troops actually gained valuable experience under his leadership. More importantly, he prevented Hannibal from potentially destroying another Roman army.
Yeah, because what happens if they fall?
Which would have undoubtedly persuaded many of Rome's allies to defect. And now he was following Hannibal back across the Apennines. The two commanders would meet again.
Leave the oxen.
It's late summer, 217 BC. As the fires across the Aga Falanus Valley died down after months of Carthaginian raiding, the locals returned to their burned towns and cities, struggling to bring their lives back to normal. Having outwitted Fabius, Hannibal escaped the valley. And now there was real fear in the Roman Senate as the Carthaginian general marched north towards Rome itself.
We got part 9 and 10 in the same video. Back across the Apennines, as well as the Battle of Geronium.
Escaping the Aga Falanus Valley with his army and plunder intact again highlighted Hannibal's genius. And as the Carthaginian army now marched north along the Volturnus River, fears in Rome were reignited that the attack on the city was imminent. But despite the road to Rome being open for the second time, Hannibal marshaled his army back into the Apennine Mountains.
Because he thinks they're going to wave the white flag.
His string of victories was not enough to secure alliances in Italy, and the Carthaginian general knew that without a firm foothold in the plains of Campania, he needed to establish winter quarters in a better strategic position. Heading back east to his old campaigning ground near the Adriatic coast was a prudent decision. Encumbered with plunder and herds of cattle, the Carthaginians moved slowly, cutting a swathe of destruction along their line of march, ravaging farms and property, collecting provisions and prisoners as they moved, unopposed by Fabius. While this unchallenged destruction of Roman lands and the prior escape from the Aga Falanus Valley were the two latest embarrassing incidents that caused outrage against Fabius in the Senate, it was in fact his strategy that preserved the Roman army from potential destruction. Thanks to Fabius, the Republic stayed in the fight, which arguably kept their Italian allies from joining Hannibal.
Yeah, because he had a pipeline, remember, in Cisalpine Gaul. He technically has a pipeline in southern Italy if he can convince the Italians, or there are different words for them as well, but if he can convince the Italians to defect, but not exactly happening right now.
Yet, due to his cautious war plans, Fabius's popularity in Rome was crumbling, and his allies in the Senate found it impossible to rally political support around him. It also didn't help that, by now, news spread throughout Rome that Fabius's property and lands were spared during Carthaginian raiding of the Aga Falanus Valley.
That's a little sus, isn't it? Just a little sus, I would have to say.
Which cast further doubts about him. The Roman general tried in vain to improve his reputation by selling parts of his property to ransom Roman prisoners from Hannibal, after hearing that the Senate would not fund their release. But despite the unabating criticism against him and demands for a more aggressive stance, he kept to the Fabian strategy, refusing to be drawn into a battle not of his choosing, and continued to shadow Hannibal. His scorched earth policy had a very limited effect, as many citizens refused to burn their towns and crops, but it did manage to hamper the movement of the Carthaginian army, which did not have a secure supply chain and had to live off the land. Meanwhile, Hannibal reached a place he deemed suitable for his winter quarters, the town of Geronium. It is unclear if Geronium was taken by force when Hannibal's terms were rejected, or if he took possession of the town after the inhabitants fled. Either way, Hannibal encamped just outside the town and had his troops repair the collapsed wall, as well as surround the town with a trench and a palisade, turning Geronium into a fortified granary for the Carthaginian army, where provisions and livestock were stored. The sick and wounded recovered in the camp, as thousands fanned out to forage the fertile plain to the west, while others pastured the cattle and horses on the hillsides to the east. With enough provisions to last until spring, in a strong defensive position, with several roads offering multiple mountain crossings into Apulia, Geronium was the perfect place to winter with an army.
It almost seems how, just think how far Hannibal has traveled from Iberia. They're very much experiencing a lot of nomadic tradition here, without even realizing it. The nomadic traveling from Iberia into Gaul, through the Alps, through Cisalpine Gaul, through Italy, past Rome, till the Valley of the Ager. Like, this is like nomadic characteristics through and through, living off the land, going to greener pastures. Just wanted to point that out. It's very interesting.
Meanwhile, in the foothills across the valley, the Romans arrived some 3 days later and began encamping. But the dissatisfaction in the Senate finally boiled over, forcing Fabius to depart for Rome. Officially, he journeyed to the capital to observe religious duties. However, the more likely reason for his absence from the front line was to confront his critics and explain his actions, in an effort to salvage any support he could for his campaign. While the political discussion raged on, back in the Roman camp near Geronium, Minucius assumed a more aggressive stance.
That's right. He was, vocal that they should attack, they should do something. The burning villas everywhere in Campania. Now, he is technically in charge.
As second in command, he was left in charge of the army with orders to follow the Fabian strategy. But, eager to put pressure on Hannibal, he set up camp in the plain, from where he sent out parties of cavalry and velites to hunt down the Carthaginian foragers.
Something.
Although most of the foragers escaped unharmed, Hannibal moved quickly to protect his foraging grounds by sending 2,000 Libyans to occupy the ridge overlooking the Roman camp. And just to the south, he established a temporary camp where he stationed 2/3 of his army.
So all that work for the Fabian strategy is basically almost wiped out, given the proximity of like 1 kilometer or 2 kilometers at most in between the two camps now. This spells battle.
Eager to square up against the enemy, Minucius sent the heavy infantry towards the Carthaginian camp, while his light infantry and cavalry went for the ridge. This seemingly created a problem for Hannibal. Not only was he outnumbered, but he left his cavalry in the main camp.
Uh-oh.
Whether he did this intentionally to appear weaker and trick the Romans into attacking, or because the horses needed resting, he now lacked the mobility needed for the clash against Minucius. With superior numbers and mobility on their side, the Romans took the ridge. Seeing his chance to put more pressure on the Carthaginians, Minucius moved his camp to the top of the captured hill.
Now, pretty much you got a 360 view of everything going on, the foraging, the base, everything. Yeah, I would say Roman has the upper hand at this point in this little area.
Expecting another attack, Hannibal restricted all foraging operations, keeping the troops in a state of readiness within the forward camp. But Minucius stayed put, and after a few days of inaction, the Carthaginian general finally broke the stalemate by sending troops to forage in ever-increasing numbers each day, until eventually some 4,000 men were committed.
Dang.
Dispersing so many troops in the surrounding countryside, while already being outnumbered, begs the question, did Hannibal so desperately need provisions for the winter and was forced to forage? Or did he want to weaken his position, perhaps even appear incompetent, to provoke Minucius into fighting and winning a few skirmishes, with the aim of luring the Roman general into a trap once he became overconfident?
We may never know, but it seems that he has had a tendency to try to provoke. He is a provocateur by nature.
Whatever the case, Minucius answered in force.
Oh, there you go.
He led the heavy infantry against the Carthaginian camp, while sending his cavalry and light infantry through the back gate to hunt down the foragers. The skirmish was a bloody affair, with the Romans getting the better of the engagement, killing many of Hannibal's foragers. Realizing it was time to regroup, Hannibal marched back to his main camp.
That's a win for Rome.
Exaggerated accounts of this victory caused widespread rejoicing in Rome. Senators and citizens alike believed that they finally had a commander who can defeat Hannibal.
Fabius won't like that.
Hailed for his success, a law was hastily passed that made Minucius co-dictator, which was effectively a return to having two senior magistrates in charge.
Yep.
But things did not go smoothly. Fabius urged caution, while Minucius wanted to take aggressive action. Due to persistent arguments over strategy, Fabius proposed that they command the army on alternate days, or split the army into two independent commands. Minucius decided to take 4 legions and establish his own camp.
Yeah, let's weaken our own base. Not smart.
Just as the sun rose over the plain beneath Geronium, the guards woke up Minucius. Hannibal was just outside the camp. For the second time, Hannibal positioned himself on the ridge, from where he could observe all activities in the Roman camp. Minucius was not about to allow him to control the engagement. The Romans advanced confidently, having previously driven Hannibal back from the same ridge and forced him to retreat to his main camp. Minucius was now determined to...
Why do you think Minucius was, besides glory, do you guys have any idea why he was so confident that he could win?
Finish the job. But this time, Hannibal was ready. As the Roman light infantry crashed into the Carthaginian...
Let me guess, there's gonna be cavalry just come out of nowhere.
...in line, it seemed like their push will again drive back the enemy. But just as his men began giving ground, Hannibal reinforced the line with troops hiding just beyond the ridge. Minucius responded by sending the Roman and allied cavalry up the hill. From his vantage point, it seemed that the Carthaginians have just about enough men to hold off his light infantry, and he was determined to break the stalemate. But as the Roman cavalry closed in, Hannibal called upon his Numidian and Spanish riders, who poured over the ridge.
Uh-oh. Yeah, this is why you don't break the camps up, Minucius.
What seemed until now like another skirmish turned into a proper battle. Outnumbered, the Roman line quickly lost ground and was pushed back down the hill. With his cavalry fully engaged, Minucius was now unable to scout the battlefield for potential ambushes. Nevertheless, he ordered his legions forward, fearing that his troops in the front will get overrun. However, what the Roman general didn't realize is that he was sending his men straight into a trap.
Really?
During the previous night, Hannibal led 5,000 Libyans and up to 1,000 cavalry, dispersing his men in groups of 200 to 300, ordering them to conceal themselves in the ravines, hollows, stream beds, and tree lines to the north and south of the ridge.
No. I mean, if you study any of the battles that Hannibal has done up to this point, you know he always has contingency groups, meaning he has, like, in his pocket a specialized unit, whether it be Numidian cavalry, whether it be extra infantry, just hiding, as we see twice in this engagement.
The skill and discipline of Hannibal's troops was evident in the flawless execution of this potentially dangerous operation.
And once again, as I spoke about it a few more battles ago, the premonitions that this guy has on how the enemy will interact with them. Like, for example, if Minucius somehow listened to the Fabian strategy, he would be sitting back, and this, these installments of cavalry in these ravines would have been for naught. But Hannibal predicted the outcome. Like, he could see the future or something.
And now, as Minucius's heavy infantry advanced up the hill, they collided with the overwhelmed Roman cavalry and light infantry, losing their cohesion. At that moment, Hannibal signaled his concealed troops to attack. From the mountain slopes across the river to the north and the ravines to the south, Libyan infantry and cavalry leapt forward. Some 3 kilometers away, Fabius could see that another disaster was looming.
He's like, yeah, I told you this would happen. They should pull his dictatorial powers of Minucius for just incompetence at this point.
Left with no choice but to help the embattled troops, he ordered his men forward.
Dang.
Back in the valley, thousands of Roman troops were being mauled in yet another perfectly executed ambush. The sequence and timing of events over the past 24 hours, all planned and orchestrated by Hannibal, so as to lure Minucius into sending his cavalry early on in the battle, thereby depriving him of the ability to scout the vast battlefield, which prevented him from discovering the hidden Carthaginian troops, ultimately resulting in his entire army being ambushed. By now, many Romans gave up and fled, fearing another full encirclement.
I don't think you can surrender. Well, I guess you can surrender. He did mention Roman prisoners before, but at some point Hannibal met an order to kill every military-aged man in a certain region, so kind of like goes back and forth on that front. But crazy, man, crazy how one man's actions can lead to so many men's death.
Seeing Fabius marching down towards the valley, Hannibal reportedly said, "That cloud on the mountains has broken into a storm at last. Finishing off those who weren't able to escape, Hannibal ordered his troops not to pursue, turning his army back towards the main camp. He did not want a battle of attrition.
We're gonna look at this total strength. Yep. 6,000 casualties. So an entire legion and some extras gone. And then Hannibal had minuscule losses comparatively.
Attrition against a numerically superior enemy, half of which were rested troops, while his own troops grew tired after hours of fighting. Having defeated the Romans yet again, Hannibal began settling in for the winter at Geronium. Meanwhile, the humiliated Minucius returned supreme command to Fabius, hailing him as his father as a show of respect. Fabius, for his part, reinstated Minucius as his second in command, treating him with utmost consideration. As the year drew to a close, the Roman army stayed at a respectful distance from the Carthaginians, though sporadic skirmishes between scouting parties and foragers continued throughout the winter. Meanwhile, in Spain, the Roman strategy of putting more pressure on Carthage continued, as the Scipio brothers pushed south of the Ebro for the first time, successfully persuading a handful of Iberian tribes to join the Roman cause.
They basically have the whole coast.
This caused grave concern for the Carthaginian authorities, who sought to restore their popularity with the tribes by organizing the return of the hostage children belonging to the tribal nobility, until now held at Saguntum to keep the Iberians loyal. The Punic commander of the city entrusted an influential Iberian noble, Abelox, with returning the hostage children to their parents. However, in a stroke of luck for the Romans, Abelox instead brought the children to them as gifts and was handsomely rewarded. The Scipio brothers subsequently took it upon themselves to return the children to several tribal leaders, taking credit for their rescue.
Well, good job.
This resulted in massive support for the Roman cause from the Iberian tribes between Saguntum and the Ebro.
Yep, I'll see.
Back in Italy, Fabius's 6-month term expired, and the Senate did not renew his dictatorial powers, giving temporary command to consuls Servilus Geminus and Marcus Attilis Regulus until the following elections resumed in just a few months' time. And now, as the year 216 BC rolled around, a Roman army of unprecedented size was being raised, as the Senate prepared to mount a major effort to engage and destroy Hannibal once and for all.
Maybe.
Credit goes to our...
Maybe. Probably not. Wow. So this episode really just encapsulated the idea of the Fabian strategy versus the aggressorship not working, especially against Hannibal, who does not play black and white. There's so much gray to his military might, whether it be concealing his cavalry, concealing infantry, utilizing terrain, utilizing provocateur like tactics. It's insane to see it play out time and time again. This is the cherry on top for a secure winter, having a decisive battle against his name's not even up there, Massunius. See, my brain doesn't even capture the name that much right there. But overall, Hannibal is him. And as you see there below, Cannae, however you want to say it, Cannae, is open for the taking in terms of that lush plains. And we will see that probably in the future episodes. Guys, this has been interesting, and watching Hannibal, basically from 9 years old, he was in Iberia with his father, grew up, took troops, fought a little bit in Iberia, moved into Gaul, escaped the tribes, won his skirmishes, crossed the Alps, lost all his elephants, went through a marsh after winning at Ticinium, wins at the Trebia, wins at Lake Trasimene, goes to the Valley of the Ager, Phalamus, secures a crazy tactical victory there, and then winters in Geronium. Like, he can't lose, it seems like, at this point. He is invincible, as an oracle would say. Thank you guys so much for watching. More to come on this episode, these episodes, rather for History March. Yeah, strap in. I'll catch you guys next time. Peace out. Bye-bye.